Hi, this is Lori, and I am the founder and CEO of Inclusivity, and this is our podcast, Inclusivi-TALKS. And today we are lucky enough to be talking to Antonio Jackson, who recently played for us during our concert series, and he is a magnificent saxophonist. And so we're just going to ask Antonio a bunch of questions and hear more about his music and his life. Antonio, how are you?
I'm good, Lori. How about yourself?
I'm excellent. Thank you for asking. So welcome to the podcast.
Yes, it's certainly a pleasure to be here. This is fun. This is probably my first online live podcast I've done ever.
Well, we are so excited to be the ones that you're doing it with. I will say as a backup to this that I first met Antonio when he performed at a kindness at home concert for us, raising awareness and collecting clothing and food for people who were experiencing housing difficulties. And
Yes.
I was so struck by how good you were. I was sitting out sort of in the hallway greeting people as they walked in. And when you started playing, I was like, oh my goodness, and walked in to see you because it was just so beautiful. So I thank you for that because it was exceptional. And then I started doing more and more research on you, and it was just fun. You're
I
really
remember
good.
meeting you.
Yeah.
Well, that was a lot of fun.
Well, and we were so glad you were there. It was a great concert. And my nephew is actually a saxophone player. And I think I've mentioned that to you, that I think at some point I really want to bring him to hear you because I think he'll be really pleased.
Oh, wow. So how old is your nephew?
He is in 9th grade.
9th grade?
And
oh, that's
he
a great
loves
age.
it. He just loves it. Yeah. He's passionate. Yeah. It is definitely a passion, which I think is so fun to watch. So,
yeah.
So, anyway, Antonio, I first just wanted to ask, how did you first get into music? Like, tell us a little bit about your musical history.
Well, I grew up not necessarily from a musical family, but my mom used to sing around the house. But my grandmother, she always played the organ, and she used to babysit me when I was a kid. And I used to listen to her play hymns on her little portable, like a little mini organ. And I used to just pluck around on the keyboard when I was little, maybe 3 or 4 or something like that. And my mom told me that years later, she told me that one of the neighbors across the hall from my grandmother, who was I guess she was a concert pianist or something like that, came over when she saw my grandmother and was like, that kid has an ear. But aside from that, it wasn't until probably, it was 4th grade, and they were starting band in elementary school. And I wanted to play the saxophone, but they didn't have any saxophones. They actually wanted me to play trumpet. They had a trumpet available. And for some reason, I don't know, just kind of gravitated to the saxophone. And my parents ended up renting a saxophone from Schmidt Music in Minnesota. And I remember going to school, and I actually had to teach myself how to play it. So it was a very interesting experience. I remember it was a very interesting experience. I used to write the letters above the notes, and I didn't know how to match the fingering with the actual note on the page, but I knew what an A was 2 fingers and a B was 1, and that's kind of how I got started.
So did your band teacher not know how to play the saxophone?
Well, no. I think what it was is they had. I see, this is such a long time ago, but what I remember is that they had certain amount of kids that could play certain instruments. Mm-hmm. And so I was not able to be in the saxophone section or whatever, but I think the teacher said, well, if he can get a hold of a saxophone or something like that, and he can play in the band.
Okay.
So yeah, because there was a slot. I think there was like a slot. The way it was set up was like there was a space for the trumpet, but there was not a space for saxophone.
Sure.
And I think I remember I took maybe 2 lessons at the music store. Mm-hmm. And then I remember going to school a couple months later and just playing in the band. It was weird. And I just kind of winged it. And I think for a few years, I really didn't understand how to read music. I just kind of played by ear a lot. And I was in the band.
And it probably gave you some interesting experience then, and you probably have a real feel for the music because you had to figure it out. So How did you even know the saxophone? Like how did you even know to want to play that?
I don't know. I think that I was just drawn to it. I think when I look at it now today, I think it called me,
Hmm.
but I just was, when I saw the instrument,
Yeah.
I just, something about it just, I don't think I had even heard saxophone before, but just something about the way the instrument was shaped, the way it looked, it just felt like I want to learn how to play that. And I remember when I got my rental, I used to like just open up the case and just look at it for a I didn't
That's
even know how to play it.
wonderful.
I mean, my mom would tell you, like, I used to carry my instrument. I mean, all through junior high, high school. I mean, I all up until I graduated, I carried that instrument with me, and like kids would tease me, but I didn't care. I would lug that instrument around. My mom was like, she would tell me that you didn't want to leave the house without that case. But for whatever reason, I was just, I don't know. I just something about it was intriguing, you
Yeah.
know?
So do you remember the first concerts that you were in as a kid? Do you remember that feeling?
I do. I remember, I'm going to really date myself. There's a particular elementary school, and I remember playing the concert, and I remember I learned most of the music, most of the parts. Because I remember when I came in, because I had to rent the saxophone, they had already been learning instruments and everything. And I would just listen and kind of learn the parts by ear. But then when I started, I would go home and I would look at the notes and look at the fingering, and I would start to kind of figure it out. And I remember playing, and it was kind of embarrassing. Maybe I wasn't embarrassed because I was just too young, but I remember I would have like A, B, C, B, G, But after about a year or so, I transferred schools, and I went to a school that they really played music. And that's where I really began to learn, because we did like John Philip Sousa, Star Spangled Banner. We did all those types of like really heavy reading songs where you had to learn how to and I would like, half of the time I was playing by ear, and the other half of the time I was reading.
Okay.
So I would learn the part by ear first, and then I would learn how to read it. And it was really strange.
And do you remember what musicians you kind of gravitated to once you started playing the sax? Did you find other musicians who played? Did you have musicians that really called to you?
You know what? In the earlier years, I just loved to play the horn, and I would take it home during the summer, and it would sit all summer. But it was the summer of my junior year of high school, and I heard this. Oh, I'm really dating myself. I heard this album, Wine Light by Grover Washington Jr.
Mm-hmm.
And I've grown up listening to the records. My mom always played records, so I listened to all the old classic R&B, like Earth, Wind & Fire. So I grew up listening to all that stuff. All that stuff was in my ear, like Stevie Wonder, all these classic, sounds were already there.
Mm-hmm.
But it was the Grover Washington Jr. Wine Light album that when I heard that him played saxophone, I was like, that's it. That's what I want to sound like. So I learned that entire album from top to bottom, and I used to play it all the time. And my mom was like, you need to go somewhere because it was the summertime, and I was staying in the house practicing. I wasn't going out. And so she found this program called the Urban Center for Talented Youth. And I went there, and they had this jazz program. And it was there I met my soon to be high school music teacher, Tom Wells, who was the band director at North High. And he heard me play, and he came over to me. It was like a 6-week, 4-week, 5-week program or something like that. And he came up and he's like, you should come to my high school and play in my band. He said, I have this other kid that plays saxophone. He comes from a great musical family. You guys would be great together. And so going into my senior year, I left the school I was at that I had been at for many years, and went to North High.
Wow. And
I started playing in the Visual Performing Arts magnet. And that kid that I played with, his name was Jason Peterson. And he is the nephew of Paul Peterson from The Family.
Okay.
And his mother is Linda Peterson, famous jazz musician. So I came right into a situation where I was hearing all this great stuff. And that's when I began to really learn and really appreciate, music and jazz and saxophone.
And at that point, did you know this is something that's going to follow me through my life?
I really didn't know it. I just did it because I loved it. I was doing a lot of things. I played sports. I was like kind of all around, but music was still the thing that I did the most. And I actually didn't, when I left high school, I went to school to study something else.
What did you go to study?
Excuse me. I went to school to study art. I wanted to be an architect.
Okay.
And I was like, math and science was kind of my thing. And physics was like, nah, you're not gonna be an architect. But I took my saxophone with me because of the magnet. So when I was at North High, we did all these little concerts for all of like these grade school kids. We had these kids like, they'd be sitting screaming, and they were really screaming at Jason. But I got to enjoy some of that benefit.
Yeah.
But when I ended up going to the University of Minnesota, Morris campus, and I brought my sax with me because that's what I did. That's what I loved doing. And I joined the jazz band, and they had 3 tiers. They had the Jazz 1, which was the top band, the Jazz 2, and Jazz 3. And coming in as a freshman, I ended up joining the Jazz 3. And that's where I began to realize, oh my gosh, I love this, And over the course of maybe like a year, I went from Jazz 3 to Jazz 2. I think even before the year was over. Yeah. I just moved into the second band. And I think a lot of it was from the ear and just that Minneapolis sound. You've heard this before, that music, that sound. Yeah, that sound is not just the style of music. It's a certain thing that resonates when you hear it. And just growing up hearing that sound, being around these musicians and just being at that particular school, when I got into a different environment, it just came out naturally. It's just like all that music just started coming out, But I just kind of followed it.
Yeah. So did you switch majors at that point, or?
No, I never switched to music. I stuck with, I was always kind of raised with that old school, like you should always have a backup, So I ended up changing majors, but I didn't go to music.
Sure.
But I did so much music. I ended up going all the way to Jazz 1. I think by the time I got into my third year, I was in Jazz 1. And I was playing second saxophone. And by this time I could read. Right. Of course. Right. But being in the jazz band really forced me to like really study saxophone. Like I had to keep up because these kids were coming from classical backgrounds. And I played classical in school, but I also played jazz. I played everything. I listened to records. These kids were coming from like playing, like when I practiced, I would put on headphones or turn on the record and I would practice. That's how I practiced. Yeah. But I was around kids who like literally sat in practice rooms and practiced music all day. So I had to really, like I had to practice a lot. Like I would go sometimes to the humanities building and practice. Like I managed to get access to a key. Mm-hmm. And, and I would go in at like 1 o'clock in the morning and practice till like 3, and I would just practice because it was so challenging. We played music that even to this day, when I look back, if I was given that music today, I probably wouldn't even be able to play it.
Okay. So you'd be practicing.
It was heavy. Oh my gosh. Talk about heavy lift. Like we played big band charts. We played music from some of the classic big band leaders, from the old days. And so it was really challenging. Yeah.
So Antonio, I want to go back a minute because you talked a bit about the Minneapolis music.
Yes.
And I think, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I feel like Minneapolis is underrated as far as the music scene. And I came from the East Coast, moved here 10 or 15 years ago. And When
Okay.
I moved, I was so just impressed with the
Yeah.
music scene here, that there are musicians. Every time I go to a show, I'm like, oh my gosh, these
Yeah.
are these are powerful musicians who are staying here
Yeah.
in Minneapolis. And so I just want you to talk about that for a little bit, because I don't think people know that. If you're not here, I don't think you know that.
Yeah. Minneapolis is it's a very, um, it's a very artistic city in the
Mhm.
sense that there's a lot of creativity
Yeah.
boiling out of the city. And I think that Minneapolis, that sound came out of the late 70s into the 80s. And, you had these groups like, I think I think that was Grand Central,
Mhm.
which was the original band. I think Prince and Jimmy and all those guys were in. Correct me if I'm wrong. I may have some of this history a little mixed up. I was a little young back then, but that creativity that they started to kind of build into the city just spread across. So all the kids coming up heard these sounds, and you have an immense amount of talent that comes out of the city. And a lot, like you said, a lot of people stay. They don't necessarily go other places, but I mean, obviously, we know who made this place really famous in regards to music.
Yeah.
But even to this day, like when I go out or when I go to like different sessions, like when you hear these people play, like you're like, wow, like they are amazing, and creative. It's
Mhm.
not just learning what other people did, but they're also innovating,
Mhm.
innovating different styles and sounds and approaches to music. And you see that's what you see here in Minneapolis, and maybe it has something to do with the fact that, it gets really cold, it's winter, and we have nothing to do in the winter, so you got to practice and work. I used to tease people about it's like, I think it's just, Minnesota's the cold. Like I've had people from Alaska say Minnesota's colder than Alaska.
Interesting.
So, but just to throw a little side note there, but the music is just like, I meet musicians that are newcomers. I know people who've been in the scene since since the earlier days, who grew up with like the Princes and the Jimmy Jams, and I just recently did a show out there in Minneapolis with Alexander O'Neill, and he's kind of coming back to the Twin Cities, and I play with these musicians that have been on this scene for many, many years. And you're right, there is, it's the music businesses can be cruel in the sense that it's picky about who it wants to pull out, and there are so many great musicians that are in Minneapolis that have this talent, immense talent, but just get overlooked, and it gets a part of that underrated like mentality, because there was this artist that was so huge, and this music that overshadowed all these other great artists that were around. And nothing, not to put anything against that, but sometimes when you have something so big, it pushes all the other great things aside because it's so huge and people looking for something and I'll be honest and tell you, like after Prince passed away, you could see it, you could feel it in the air, especially like I was watching The Voice and there was an artist from Minnesota. And when you listen to the newscast, and you can feel in the air that Minneapolis is looking for that next Prince. Not to fill his shoes, because they don't want to do that, but someone to kind of bring it to that level. But what they're forgetting is that there are so many great artists that are already here.
Right.
So that's kind of my take on it.
So you graduated from college. What happened next? What was your next step?
Well, I went from college to college.
Okay.
So the University of Minnesota Morris was probably one of my greatest experiences, because playing in that band, we were directed by the great Jim Carlson, who was probably one of the great band directors of that era, and college band directors. And because of him and because of the quality of the people, the musicians, and how hard we worked, we were able to go we did festivals all over the world. We ended up we did New Orleans Jazz Festival, and then we got picked out of pretty much thousands of bands submitted from around the world to play at Carnegie Hall with the Count Basie Orchestra. And then that same year, we got notified that we were also chosen one of the top 25 bands in the world to play at the Montreal Jazz Festival. So that band it was just an incredible experience. It took me many places that I probably would have never gone. Mm-hmm. And it made me look at music on a very serious level. I was practicing. I was, during the summer, I would come back to Minneapolis and I would hit the jam sessions. And I ran into a wonderful musician. I used to hang out with, I used to go to these like music in the park jazz sessions on the Saturdays and go to these different open mics. And I would meet some of these great musicians. Some of them were like from the Sounds of Blackness, the great Morris Wilson, Gene Adams, Billy Holloman. I used to sit in with all these people, the Artist Quarter, all these great spots. And I met all these great musicians. I even at one time had an opportunity to hang out with the Sounds and play with them. But I was like, I gotta go back to school. So those it opened up a lot of doors. And so when I got back to school and I was getting ready to graduate, I decided to continue. Mm-hmm. So I applied to Berklee College of Music in Boston and got accepted. And after college, things kind of had a weird situation where it didn't work out as I wanted to plan. So I ended up taking off about a year, but I moved out to Boston half the year. And then I started classes the following year and I studied at Berklee. And so I went from a whole nother experience. Berklee is considered the world's top contemporary music school, and probably one of the top music schools next to Juilliard, and but as far as contemporary music, it's considered the top contemporary music school in the world. And so they have we call it the Berklee way, a method of teaching their proteges. And it's a lot of, it's not just music, it's, you study pretty much every field of music. You can choose a major if business, engineering, teaching, education. And Berklee was probably, I would say, equally as much of a great experience as the U was, but in a different way. Okay. I really got my feet wet as a musician. And I actually used to play around town. I played with several bands in Boston. And I used to we have this jazz club in Boston called Wally's. And it's kind of like, every city, the East Coast city, every city has a certain place where all the jazz musicians go. It's like a stomping ground. And it's where you go to kind of learn your lesson, get your butt kicked sometimes. And you go in there and you might think you know something, and you get in there and you meet musicians that will probably run circles around some of the greatest musicians who are recording. Mm-hmm. And you either keep up or get out. And sometimes you can be on stage and you're playing, and if you're not doing it right, they will stop the music. You will get embarrassed. And it's a great place to, those kind of places where you learn, it's chopping block, so to speak. And I used to go down there because I had already went to school and had a lot of experience. I was able to keep up, but I had so much to learn. I mean, there were nights I'd go down there and I'd be like, okay, I need to learn how to do it. And I would go home and practice or go back to, so it was, I got a lot of experience on the ground, so to speak, playing in Boston. It was kind of like, I learned the hard way, going and playing with some of the top students, musicians, people would, a lot of the famous artists would come into town and perform, and then they would go there afterwards. And so we knew they were coming. Like, for example, one night Wynton Marsalis came into town, they performed, and afterwards they go to the jam session and hang out. And we knew. So we were down there waiting for them, and here they come. And I was fortunate enough to be able to get on stage and play with them. And, I mean, those are the kind of experiences I had in Boston. Yeah. those smoky jazz clubs where it's standing room only and the stage is about this big and there's people like, you know, the audience is literally right in front of you and the pressure is on, there's a bead of sweat. Sure. But the, you know, so that's the kind of experience Boston gave me. It was a very up close, you know, I learned how to be a performer. I learned how to be a musician on stage. That's probably the best way to put it. I learned how to play, you know, and in some situations you're kind of forced to.
Yeah. But it sounds like you loved it too.
I did. Oh yeah.
The growth and just the breadth of it. It sounds like was tremendous.
You know, the music is something. If it's in you, it doesn't go anywhere, and it will call you. And I think that the desire to want to get, you know, because there's a lot of different things going on in the young musician. You know, you want to be able to sound like the people you look up to. You want to, so you have to study the masters. You know, you have to study the ones that came before you. But you also, at some point, you don't think about it as a young musician, but as you grow as an artist or as a musician, you eventually want to create your own style. But before you get there, you got to learn how to play. And you want to be able to play in environments where, you know, what you like. Saxophone is considered a jazz instrument. So, you know, you want to be able to be able to compete as an artist or as a musician to play in those kind of environments where people say, okay, now that you can play here, let's play over here. You know, it wasn't always about being better than anybody else. It was just about the opportunity to play more, you know. And so you want to learn how to do these things. And the more you learn, the more you practice, the more you're able to express yourself. And that's the most important thing, is learning how to express, you know, because music is like, you know, you have certain feelings, you have some days are good days, some days are not great. But when you get on the instrument, you're able to express that. You're able to like release that and, you know, kind of voice that internal feeling that you have, whether it's a good feeling or not so great feeling. And music helps you do that.
And it sounds like you were pulled to it. Like you said, that it's almost like the saxophone called you, and then you were pulled to follow that musical path.
Yeah, I would say that. I say that more today, and not just the saxophone, but music. You know, because I always write. I always plucked around. I was playing piano first, so my mom always. Didn't say this earlier. My mom always believed in having a piano in the house. She always had a piano in the house, even if no one knew how to play it. We just always had a piano. And so I used to always, from my grandmother, listening to her and plucking on her little keyboard, my mom was finally able to get a piano. When she finally bought one, I was in high school, then I would pluck on it. And to be honest with you, I would listen to musical scores. I was a huge fan of Star Wars and a huge fan of John Williams. And his music, and John Williams wrote all the music for, you know, Star Wars, all the Indiana Jones, Jaws, all these big Steven Spielberg. He's basically the guy that did all the music for those Close Encounters. So I would listen to all that orchestration, and I would learn it on piano. And I was a huge fan. This is going to sound funny, but on piano, I was a huge fan of the John Carpenter theme from Halloween. As a kid. So I learned the entire score on piano, and I would just play it. You know, and I think that my music today is a reflection of orchestration. So a lot of my music sounds like soundtracks as opposed to just songs. In particular, my latest album, I think it's more of like, you know, a soundscape than it is, you know, different songs. So, you know, I think it was as much music as it was the saxophone. You know, music has always kind of been in my ear, in my, you know, on the inside. So, and the saxophone is kind of the tool.
So when you write music, because you write some of your own music, you write for all the different instruments. So you write sort of everything. Well,
I you know, it varies. So I used to score a lot. You know, technology has kind of pulled us away from that. I used to actually manuscript, like write parts out. Kind of miss it. but because we don't do it as often, don't have as much time. But I will write. I will arrange horns. I love harmonies, so I'll arrange instrumental harmonies, parts. And then in Berkeley, at Berkeley, there's a core. When you study at Berkeley, you have to take certain classes. So you have to take, you know, harmony, and you have to take notation. So you have to take all these core classes that teach you the basics of writing and scoring and conducting and all that stuff. So I took those skills that I learned at school, and I applied them to my real life. And I would actually write and arrange, you know, different horn sections. And then having big band experience taught me how to listen and hear those different parts. And so in my music today, I'll arrange different horn parts, I'll arrange vocal parts, I'll arrange different sounds, just like a producer. You know, I'll produce and I'll have strings. I add a lot of strings to my music, violins, contrabass, everything, clarinets, you know. So it depends on where I'm going with the music. So it depends on where the music leads you, is what I write.
So during your career, has there been any particular musicians that you've had the chance to play with that you just think, wow, this was, I'm sure there are lots, but are there any in particular that stand out that you just think?
You know, I have had some really great experiences. And I think I still have more to come, but we just lost Ellis Marcellus, and I got a chance to play with him when I was at the U. And that was an incredible experience. You know, even had a little bit of one-on-one time with him. And I didn't think about it at the time, but when I look back, I had the opportunity to play with Red Rodney. I actually played with him on stage. Red Rodney is a trumpet player from back in the day who used to play with Charlie Parker.
Okay.
And or had played with Charlie Parker. And I actually filled the Charlie Parker role. And I played, we did Groovin' High at one of our jazz festivals in front of thousands of people. Very intense. And I got a chance to play with him. And I got the chance. I remember my band director saying, do you know you're fulfilling Charlie Parker's shoes right now? Because this guy has played it. And I was like, yeah, sure. I didn't think about it. I'm glad I didn't, because I probably would have messed it up. Right. But when I look back on that experience, and he's long gone now, but you know, that was such a great opportunity to be in that role and to fulfill that role alongside another legend. Yeah. And I think that's I played for a lot of people over the years and have opened up for a lot of people, but that one kind of strikes a chord because Charlie Parker is there's no words. Yeah. You know, no words. You know, so I could go down the list of opportunities, but you know, my most recent is, and I haven't played with him yet, but someone I grew up listening to from the moment they came out to this very day is Najee. He's a contemporary jazz saxophonist. And not only have I got a chance to open up for him, but I got a chance to meet and talk with him. And now I'm an endorsee of one of his saxophones. So looking forward to working with him in the near future as well. Herbie Hancock. You know, I could go down the list.
So what's next for you as far as what you said you have a new album?
Yes. Okay. So, you know, with the quarantine thing, you know, it's crazy, but it's interesting because more people are listening to music now because they're home. And so while a lot of us are out of work, musicians are not working, there are a lot of opportunities for people to hear, you know, the music now because people are, you know, they're home. You know, so this album, I recorded this album 2 years ago and ran into a lot of roadblocks in releasing it. And I finally released it at the end of November. And now we're starting to push it out, and now it's getting airplay. It's on smoothjazz.com. It's all over Spotify, and you know, we're pushing it out overseas, and it's getting a lot of good reviews. But the album is called Simplicity, and it basically, where I was coming from was kind of a simplifying of life. And interesting enough, we're kind of in that phase right now. So the album is weird. It's like the album just kind of blends right into what's happening today.
Yeah.
So, you know, as you get older, you know, as age, you know, as you get mature, you know, at some point you start wanting to kind of like make things less complicated, you know, and kind of simplify. And that's kind of the stage I'm at musically and just in life. And that album is kind of a reflection of that.
It's a perfect album for this time then. You're right. It's the fact that you ran into complications, maybe you were supposed to, so that you could really be introducing the album now.
You know, I thought about that and I was like, you know what, maybe this is, you know, this is the right time. Because it was like, you know, make a long story very short, the album got lost because the hard drive completely went dead. And about 2.5, almost 3 years of work. And I was like, oh my gosh, I gotta, you know, the album is gone, everything's gone, my work. And I happened to be on my desktop, my laptop, and I went into the trash bin, and there it was. The album I had tossed, one of the old versions. It wasn't the most recent version. Excuse me for 1 second. I'm just going to plug this phone in really quickly because I don't want to lose you. Just give me 2 seconds to just plug this in. I don't want to lose the feed. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about the chaos.
No problem.
And I have a cord here. Just want to make sure I don't lose the connection here. Just plug this in. I'm sorry I didn't have it charged. I should have. Excuse me 1 second.
No problem. We'll just cut out all of this probably.
You're like, hey, what's
No problem.
There we go. Okay, got it plugged in. All right. There we go.
Perfect.
All right, we are good to go. All right. But
So
I ended up
found an older version.
Yes. Yeah, so it wasn't the edited, revised, more updated version that I had worked on. I had did all this remixing and remastering on the album, but it was good enough that it was finished. And I was like, you know, long gone are the days of perfection where you want to put out the perfect album.
Right.
You want to get music out. Yeah. And I was like, you know, it sounds good. I was like, there's some flaws in it, but you know, I wish I could fix. People probably won't notice it, but I just went ahead and I touched it up. I was so thankful. I was like, whew. And I put it out. Okay. You know, I put it out. And I had no intention of marketing it and putting it out on the level that it's on right now. I just wanted to get this album out. And I had a couple of good songs. Songs on there. I thought, oh yeah, I want the world to hear those songs. But I really wasn't putting it out to be on that level. Mm-hmm. But now it's kind of pushing to that. So I'm like, oh. But yeah, it was, you know, that was one of the ordeals. And that was probably the big deal, is the fact that there's a finished album that still has not been released. Right. That it's still somewhere on a hard drive that I'm still trying to retrieve. Okay. And but this version is good enough. Okay. You know? Yeah.
So when you're not playing music, what do you do? What are your other passions?
Well, that's all I do.
I have actually heard other musicians say, what?
Someone's asked me about that. Well, I'm a family guy as well. I mean, I have my daughter. Well, my daughter lives in a different state, but I think I'm just a creative. Mm-hmm. So I'm a designer as well. So I'm into the graphic design. So my believe it or not, this is going to sound weird, but in the music, as an independent artist, you have to do all the roles. Yeah. You know, so I had to learn how to use Photoshop and all that stuff years ago because I had no choice. Mm-hmm. But I actually like creating and designing. So one of my hobbies is the work that I do in the design of the work I do for my music career.
Okay.
It's kind of a hobby, like, so the work is kind of a hobby of the work. So like designing or working on the website or CD cover or, you know, working on a video is kind of a hobby for me, even though it's work. But other stuff, I mean, I picked up the martial arts when I probably the same year I started learning the saxophone.
Okay.
So I've been practicing, you know, over the years, and that's kind of a hobby.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I have other things, you know, I used to love to dance.
Okay.
You know, I'm a ham when it comes to that kind of stuff. I mean, I'm more of a creative. I do this a lot.
Okay.
So most of my days, if I'm not working on music, then I'm spending time with my significant other, and that's pretty much it. Because you know, I do this a lot. Yeah, my days are 8 days a week. You know, anywhere from 10, 12 hours, and it's not just playing. You know, there's different stages. There's, you know, as far as the saxophone is concerned, there's practicing, there's performing, and there's recording. So I might practice the instrument, just practicing my routine, scales, whatever, whatnot. And then I'll spend another couple hours recording on music, songs for other projects. And then performing is actually going out and performing. As of late, since we're not going out, I've been doing a live on Instagram on Sundays. And, you know, so that's the performing part. And then there's the writing, there's the production, there's the creative process, then there's the business.
Yeah. So
all those different components, you know, I'm fortunate enough, you know, I used to play basketball. I played sports, you know. I probably could have a much stronger outdoor life.
Well,
but
you can't really go out and play sports right now. So.
Right. So, you know, I hate to say this, and this is going to sound bad, but it's true. You know, the quarantine, it doesn't have as much of an effect on me as it does on other people. Sure. Because I'm working all the time, you know, and I'm probably working more now than I was working before this.
So if you were going to say something to young musicians coming up, something about sort of, I don't know, if you were just going to give some words of wisdom or either that, or even just sort of your life philosophy that you would share with us, what would that be? What would you say?
Well, I would say to the young artists, I always tell young people, because I do work with young people, that it is important to follow your dreams. But you also have to study your dream too as well. And it's important to work hard, you know, and to learn, because the more you learn, the more you're able to do. And so I always, you know, try to inspire young people to, you know, follow their passions. It's important because, like, for example, when you ask me about hobbies, I mean, it's not a hobby, but I love doing it. So it's work, but I sit down and start, I look up, it's 12 hours, you know, and I used to sit in an office. I know what that's like. I know what it's like to work, you know, 9 to 5, and, you know, that 1 hour can feel like 12 hours. Yep. So it's important to follow, but it's also important to study, because that's how you develop yourself, you develop your craft, you know. I also believe that it's important to surround yourself around good people. And it starts early, your peers, your friends, you know, I always tell kids, like, you know, you hang out with a kid, and I've said this to my daughter, it's like, you know, there are kids that are doing these things and there are kids that are doing these things. And you have to decide what you're going to do so that you can decide which direction you're going to hang out with, you know, because there are certain influences that can keep you from doing the things that you want to do. And so, starting off with your peers and your friends, with kids in high school, grade school, it's like, it's important to make decisions as to who you're going to spend your time with, because they influence you as much as, even more than you influence them. And I also tell young people, that it's important to believe in yourself, because not everybody, you shouldn't have to wait for people to tell you that you're great. You have to believe it. You have to look in the mirror and say, even when you're not, you have to look in the mirror and say, you know what, I can be, I will be, I am, and then from there, you develop self-confidence enough to go out and take those chances and do those types of things. And, because kids, are cruel. I mean, the world can be cruel in the sense that it can tell you, oh, why are you doing that?
Mm-hmm.
You shouldn't be doing that. Or, the first thing people say when someone says, oh, I just did this, they're excited. And then someone says, well, why? And then it just, like a pin just pops the balloon. And then like, and then they go home and they say, well, yeah, why? And so you have to this new generation, they're speaking those kind of things. You see it, you hear a lot of that on social media, but you also still see the haters and all the people that get in the way, roadblocks of people's dreams and desires. And sometimes it's just your environment. Sometimes you have to change, you hang out with kids at school, sometimes you got to change. You got to hang out with some different kids. Sometimes you got to separate from the pack, so there's a lot of things you can say, but I always say believing in yourself is the number one thing. And, sticking, following what's true, what's inside. And then, you can't just step out there and do it. You can step out there and do it, but you have to study it. You have to learn about it. You have to find out what it entails, and that's the work part of it, Some people I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. No.
I was going to say, there are some people in this world who are gifted. Like God just said, dropped a couple stars on the earth, and they don't have, they just pick up a saxophone and 2 months later they're playing better than Charlie. There are people like that, but, for most of us, we have to you have to do the legwork. You have to kind of get in there and you have to pick the instrument up. People, I want to learn saxophone. Well, get one. Start playing, and just, get on YouTube. Now you can get on YouTube and
right.
It's amazing. I mean, I wish I had this as a kid. I'd probably be 100 times better than I am now, or even sooner,
right. I was going to say, you're pretty darn good now.
I'm all right. But, I was one of those kids, like I was talented, but I still had to work hard. Yeah. I had to practice.
Yeah.
Like I had to practice. I mean, I still do. I have to practice. Like there's still, and music is something, and saxophone in particular is something that you don't ever get there. Yeah. You're always learning. You're always applying. There's always something new to learn. There's always something more to add on. Mm-hmm. And the problem that a lot of musicians make is that they stop. Yeah. They stop at a certain level, and they, not that they feel that they've arrived, but they just kind of, but there's always room, and I'm just a student of life, mm-hmm. And I feel like, it's important to always learn and grow, because then you're able to express more because of it.
I love that lesson that, is follow your passions, but you have to work at them. Just because they're your passions doesn't mean it's going to be easy.
Yes. Yes.
Sometimes people feel like, well, as long as I follow my passion, I'll be fine and it'll be easy. And I think that I love that you said it that way. Follow your passion and work on it.
It is. I mean, it's just like anything in life. And I see a lot of people, I've seen it even with my own, it's like, you want to do something, but you think just jump right in and do it. Well, in some cases, there are some certain situations where people can, because it's already there, but in most cases you have to put some time into it, mm-hmm. And for some people it could be years, some people it could be months. It doesn't, everyone's level is different. You know, some people can, there are probably people out there who've never played saxophone, and, you know, they want to learn how to play, and you start showing them, and a week later you're like, you are phenomenal. It's like, you know, everyone's level is different,
Right.
but you have to start somewhere. You have to first say, this is where point the direction you want to go in, and then you gotta take the steps to get there. And then as you begin to take those steps, then you start realizing, you know, what it takes.
So I want to ask you 2 more questions, and then I want to ask if you'll play something for us before we leave.
All right.
So and you can say no, and we'll just cut it right out.
No, sure, no. I just gotta get my reed wet.
So my first question is, behind you, it looks like there are 2 album covers.
Oh yeah, yes.
And what are those?
That 2 of my inspirations. I actually just rearranged the space about a week and a half ago. I had them in a different location, and I'm going to be doing some writing. Even though we have a new album, I'm always writing music, so I'm starting to begin the process of working on a new album. And 2 of my inspirations behind me, I don't know if you can see them.
I can see one on your right. Yep.
So this one that's Grover Washington Jr., and that's the Mr. Magic album. Okay. And that's a classic album. One of the first songs I heard on saxophone before I even heard his Wine Light album. And didn't even know what I was listening to. Right. But many years later, I learned that song, and it's a classic. Every jazz musician, every saxophonist, every musician in the world that plays music knows that title track off that album. Mm-hmm. On this side is, you cannot miss this guy right here. It's Prince.
Of course. Okay.
Yeah, that's his debut album, and that album is just monument. I mean, it's just historical. But just being inspired, you know, and representing my hometown, you know, and the music that comes out of that, you know, the artists. When you think about Prince, you have to think about all of the artistry that comes out of that city, you know, and comes spawned from him as well too, you know. So those, and I have them sitting up in front of the keyboard, because when I'm sitting in front of the keyboard, it's that inspiration, that energy is, you know, kind of just fuels whatever happens there.
Okay.
So that's what's going on.
Then my last question is, if you can look back at your life and just tell us a story from your life, and it doesn't have to do anything with music, it could be just anything that feels like yours. So it doesn't have a lesson, doesn't have to be the story, just something that you say, in my life, this happened, at whatever age you choose to tell.
Oh, wow. Wow, that's interesting. I have a lot of experiences. I don't know, you want a good one, bad one, doesn't matter. They're all, I mean, I don't know. Gosh, wow. I mean, I could think of go down a list of a lot of different things that have happened to me. Wow, that's a great question.
Thank you.
That's a great question. I mean, wow. Because I can think of a lot of different things. I just don't know what to pick out of, you know. I'll just say this, I've had some things happen to me that were not great, but out of those situations came great things, you know. I don't know if I should say that one. What a lot of people don't know, will learn, is that I was a single dad. I raised my daughter. And the reason for that is because her mother, who was my wife at the time, passed away. And so out of that experience came the joy of becoming a, you know, full-time single dad, and also learning how to manage my life as an artist, as a musician, you know, while still working and raising this child. And out of that experience came the joy of parenting. And that experience alone is probably one of my biggest, you know, and I learned a lot of lessons in life because of it. You know, I could just go Now, I learned a lot about myself, you know, and about music. I'm sorry?
Tell us a story about a time with your daughter. Just a specific story of something.
Oh, wow. A specific story, man. Man.
I'll give you a couple examples. Someone told you a story the other day about toilet papering a neighbor's house. Someone else told a story about trying to fry an egg on the sidewalk because she was a kid and she had heard that that would work.
Oh, okay. Oh man. I don't, gosh, I have some wacky moments. With my daughter, I mean, I don't know. We haven't done a lot of wacky stuff, but we, yes. I mean, man, I have so many things I could probably pick out of. I don't even know where to begin.
Just pick one. Anything.
I mean, now I feel like I want to change to a different trajectory now. It's like
totally different.
You know, I'll tell you. I will tell you this though. Here's something that was funny. This is kind of music related. So when we were in Switzerland, they had this jam session, and I had been wanting to meet. They had, you know, all the people that played at the big festival would go to the session afterwards, and we had heard about it. Our hotel was about almost 5 miles away, and we didn't realize how far away we were.
Wow.
But we walked to this thing. We must have walked almost an hour and a half, me and about 3 other people. We got there, and I saw Shaka Khan. I saw Al Jarreau, George Duke, Herbie Hancock, all these great people. And I was looking for one person. That one person was not there, but all these great people. And I was like, and basically all these great musicians. And I said, well, man, I saw one of the musicians on stage. And I was like, man, can I sit in with you guys? He's like, sure. And I was like, oh. So, but guess what? I didn't have my saxophone. So I was like, okay, I'll be right back. And I was with the 3 other guys that came with me. I was like, guys, I got to go back and get my saxophone. So I literally, it's about 1:30 in the morning. The session's starting at about 1 o'clock in the morning. So more people coming in. It goes to like 4 or 5 in the morning. It's like an after hours thing. It's at a hotel. It's like a little lounge in the hotel where all these famous people came and hang out, and it's open to the public to come and just hang. And they were playing, like just jamming. So I literally ran from the hotel nonstop, sweating. I ran about 4 miles, 4.25 miles, something like that. I don't know. All the way back to the hotel, got inside, got the key. Got the saxophone, because when I got to the thing, I didn't have a key, didn't have access. So I was ringing the front desk to get in, and I got in, went into the room, got my saxophone, ran all the way back nonstop. I was passed out.
And were they still playing?
And I got there and I was like breathing, and they were still playing. And I thought I'd missed my opportunity. And I was like, catch my breath. And my friend Malcolm was like, he's like, you're crazy. I was like, I know, but I want to play. And I started taking out the horn, and one of the guys that's standing there, I was like, can I play with you guys? And he's like, yeah, sure. You got your horn? I was like, yeah. So I ended up taking out my horn, out of breath, and I ended up playing. And here comes Shaka Khan, and she comes and she sits down on the drum set, and she starts playing. And she's a singer, but she's playing drums. And then Nathan East comes over. He's a famous jazz musician from the foreplay, and he comes over, and then George Duke, and and I'm playing with these guys. And it was one of those experiences where it was probably something I still talk about to this day, because of that. Yeah.
That's a great story.
No toilet paper story.
And that's okay. That was a great story. So thank you. This has been a real pleasure. Can you play something for us as we close?
Sure. I'll just play a little bluesy stuff.
That's lovely.
Does that sound like a plan? All right.
That was just beautiful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
Antonio, this was a real pleasure. Thank you so much for talking to us.
I had a lot of fun. It was a pleasure for me as well, too. Thank you so much, Lori. I
All right,
appreciate it.
thanks. All right, everybody, thanks. We're going to say goodbye now. And Antonio Jackson. And your website is just Antonio Jackson, right?
Yes, AntonioJackson.com. You can also just anything Antonio Jazz Sax. So AntonioJazzSax.com. Instagram is Antonio Jazz Sax. Facebook is Antonio Jazz Sax. Twitter is Antonio Jazz Sax. And YouTube is just Antonio Jazz.
All right.
Easy to find.
Thank you so much, Antonio.
Thank you, Lori.